Bags packed,
Mirrors adjusted.
GPS set,
We're
road trip ready. I'm Chris.
And I'm Danielle. We're two road trip enthusiasts collectively clocking in hundreds of miles
Or kilometers.
a year exploring the U.S. and Canada.
Now, if you love discovering new destinations
And hidden gems.
The best kept secrets locals cherish, and ways to make your road trips more enjoyable
And affordable.
You're in the right place.
Time to shift into drive and get you
road trip ready.
Welcome, everyone. We're so excited for this launch of the show, Road Trip Ready. We're going to be unpacking a couple things in terms of how we got started here, why we really wanted to create a new podcast dedicated to road trips, and some of our backstories of like how impactful road trips have been for us and how things have changed, especially after, 2020 on all those things. So, Chris, why now? Like, why road trips? Like, why even start here?
Well, I think it goes back, and I don't want to bring this up again, but I think it goes back to the pandemic. For me personally, when I look back, it was just before the pandemic in 2018, around there, with my international website, Rudderless Travel. I just started to branch into day trips. And I realized that I really love doing that, the day trips, like just jumping on a train or a car or a bus and just kind of like moving away from the big cities and just exploring those little towns and those little villages, because those are the places where you really learn about a destination. And then come 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020, where the whole world shut down. And in the beginning there, no one really knew what to do. We were all stuck inside. And but slowly we were allowed to, because we're in lockdown, we were allowed to start going out and exploring a little bit here and there. So we could go maybe hiking or something, or we can go, for a day trip to another city or town. And I realized that, because that's all we were allowed to do, we really had an appreciation for that. So I started Road Trip Ontario at that time. And all I was doing, quite literally, is every other weekend I would go somewhere, like a small town, hang out for the day, and I would just do day trips all the time. Next weekend I would stay at home. The next weekend I would go someplace new, and I was just writing about it, documenting, doing videos, all that kinds of stuff. And then one other thing happened during the pandemic is, for us up in Ontario, Canada, our government, the provincial government, started to offer rebates for people if they, in order to help the tourism industry, because the tourism industry was really suffering. So in order to help the tourism industry, they started to offer rebates, tax credits, if you stay somewhere for a weekend. So then immediately I started doing more weekend getaways. And so that's what brings me to where we are now. And I mean, during this time, I really had this mass appreciation for my own backyard, really. And that's how I got to where I am right now.
2020 and the years that followed, it offered a lot of people a chance to switch things up, have new insights and perspectives, and to try different things. And that is absolutely the case for me as well, because prior to 2020, and when we say 2020, y'all know what we're talking about, right? So prior to 2020, I was really focused on air travel. So my area of focus, number one, I'm all about financially savvy travel. And that's why I focus over on the thought card. My whole entire brand is all about travel more and building wealth. But air travel was my thing. And the reason why it was my thing is because I found cheap flights all the time. And going to Europe was easy. Europe was my backyard because flights were as cheap as under $200 from New York City regularly. So I really built my travel portfolio based off of traveling cheaply via flights. And when 2020 happened, flights were, grounded and we were not doing air travel anymore. And it was like, what's next for us, right? Like that for me was huge. So my husband and I decided to do more local stays, a couple states over in Vermont. And during that time, around 2020, 2021, I felt like I went to Vermont so often. And there are a couple reasons why Vermont always captured me. It's like the rugged wilderness, the greenery, the small towns, the friendliness, the countryside, all of those things, the greenery, the landscapes. I love it so much. And it really made us like love the whole everything that goes into road trips, right? From the packing, which I hate, but still the packing, the car, the picking, the selection, whether it was music versus podcast, the bonding time, the hours it took to get to the destination, spending time at the destination. I just love that whole process. And I started actually like highlighting that more on my platform, thoughtcard.com, to the point where it's so much easier today, 3 years later, almost 4 years later, to hop in the car and go somewhere new versus hopping on a flight and going further away. So for me, it's more about accessibility, affordability also. I have expanded my family, so I have a son now, and even thinking about traveling with pets, which we're going to cover on the podcast. All of those things are easier to do via road trips, right? So there's just a lot of reasons, and I'm really excited for this project because Chris and I, like, we've been thinking about working together on a project for a really long time. We had like a podcast idea before I even launched my podcast. We've always worked very closely together, and we've always wanted to create a new project. So this is that project. So, Chris, I guess what do you want for listeners to get out of this show, and what can they expect from your perspective? What are you looking forward to sharing here?
Yeah. All right. So a couple of things I want to just comment on before I dive into that. So I wanted to add to your point about the small towns. For me personally, when I started to road trip, like as I said off the top, like I started with day trips, and we're talking. I'm from Toronto, so I started day trips around to the neighboring towns, and in a couple of hours you leave the city and you're in the rural area of the province, and I started to discover all these little towns. Some of them even have like European if type of feel. And for me, it was like, I can't believe these places exist here because, like you, I was constantly focusing on places outside of my country, outside of my own backyard. And yeah, I mean, I started to discover these little towns, these little cute places. So I completely agree with you. These little towns, these little gems. And that leads into the question that you're asking me in terms of what I hope people will get out of this podcast is really to discover those hidden gems. For some reason, it doesn't even matter where you are, in which country, because I've spoken with people abroad as well. Like we're talking people from places like Rome or, Zagreb and Croatia. And I feel there's this lack of appreciation for your own backyard. And so for me, I really want people here in North America to actually appreciate their own backyard. Um, you know, get off the highway. I'm not saying not to go overseas because that's its own, thing of amazing things there. But your own backyard offers so much in terms of right around the corner. It could be like a day trip, like 90 minutes from your house, for example, or, a weekend getaway. Maybe it's 4 hours from your house or something like that. Like there's all these hidden gems, all seasons, from fall foliage to winter to skiing to hikes, to nature, to beer, as we like to talk, but not just beer, like wineries, cideries, distilleries, like just all these places that are just local. And, that's, I think, the main thing that we would like people to get from this podcast, in addition to tips and tricks, like, in your wheelhouse, how to save money, how to, travel better, smarter, those kind of things. Uh, for sure. I think those are some of the things that I would like to take away. Like, what about you? What are you looking to get out of this podcast? And what do you hope the listeners get out of this podcast?
Absolutely, 1,000%. The hidden gems is a big aspect and a core pillar that we will definitely be touching upon over and over again. I'm really looking forward to hearing from locals. That to me adds another layer to travel. It provides way more context and it provides sometimes historical perspectives. It provides cultural undertones. There's just so much when you actually listen to the local perspective that enriches you as a potential traveler or someone who is just very curious about the world and how people live. I love learning about not only those beautiful destinations, those click Instagram worthy photos, but like let's get deeper and talk about okay, what led to the creation of this museum and how important this historical figure is, or how does this bakery owner make their specific type of bread, and how that type of bread has been in their family for hundreds of years, right? There's just like so many incredible local stories that I'm really looking forward to sharing on the podcast so that when you go to these destinations or when you're thinking about them, now you have a deeper layer and deeper context. I am also really looking forward to accessing folks that I think the average traveler may not have access to, meaning like the historians and the directors of some of these larger and sometimes even smaller establishments that you will go to as a visitor, but you don't get to hear from their perspective. Like, why did they pick out this exhibit, for example? Or, those hidden things that they're really expert at. To me, that's why I love having a podcast is being able to bring those stories and perspectives to the forefront. So it's real, like you hear it from them versus just like reading it in a blog post or something like that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what locals know, hearing their historical perspectives and just highlighting all of those. And I also am definitely leaning more into storytelling. So, to be upfront and honest, I'm not a journalist, but through this world of content creation, I have now been thrown into journalism in many regards and storytelling. And it's so fun to uncover and tell and help tell stories. So I'm really looking forward to using the podcast for storytelling. So there will be quite a bit of destination focused episodes where we literally will talk about one aspect and really go deep into that aspect, as well as, the tips and tricks like Chris mentioned, but I'm really looking forward to those stories and, just kinda crafting those I'm really, really excited about. Let's talk about what listeners can expect in terms of, like, formatting and yada yada. So, we are definitely gonna be doing a biweekly release, so you can expect to get new episodes both on your podcast player, whatever you choose, whether it's Apple, Spotify, and also YouTube.
Instead of just having, us talking on a screen, which is fine because we're both very good looking people. So you could sit there and look at us all day. We won't be disappointed. But we're going to try to include, our interviews, sitting down with people, what's called in the industry B-roll footage. So we'll try to include lots of footage of whatever it is, whoever it is we're talking about. So as Danielle mentioned, if we're interviewing a baker, then we're going to try to include a lot of additional footage of them at their craft, making beer, making wine, making bread. If they're an artist, if they're, whatever it is, like we're going to try to include a lot of that footage. So for those that are joining us on YouTube, they can actually see what we're talking about, which is really cool. So that's the big piece that video will allow for us to incorporate into this podcast. So I'm very, very excited about bringing that to you guys as well.
I'm excited for Road Trip Ready. We have some incredible things coming up on the pipeline for everyone. Two things I want you to do before we head out. One, I want to make sure you join our newsletter. So, when you subscribe to our newsletter, we're going to be sharing with you tips and strategies to get you road trip ready. We're also going to be sharing with you new episodes, outtakes, behind the scenes. We're both photographers and videographers, so we'll be definitely be sharing with you some of those behind the scenes photos to help you again inspire you. And again, our whole point for this show is to get you out the door, but we understand that there are a couple things you need to know beforehand. So definitely subscribe to our newsletter to get the latest scoops and to get any premium content that we actually create as well. The link again will be in this episode description for you. And then lastly, follow the podcast. In order for you to get new episodes sent directly to your phone, you have to follow the show. So we encourage you to follow. We have amazing, amazing stories and interviews and all the things that will help you to get ready for your next road trip. So those are our call to actions. Definitely hit that subscribe button on YouTube and do all the things.
Agreed.
All right, y'all. That is all. Yes. All right, y'all. That is all for episode number 1. Chris, we did it. Episode 1 is in the books. We'll catch you in the next one.